Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Team Training Tuesday. I also like to call it Applied Neolife. We have an awesome opportunity that we want to share, and I hope today's presentation will give you even more enthusiasm and reason, let's just put it that way, to share what we've got. My name is Esa Zanambasi. I am a medical doctor by training. I do Neolife for the simple reason that I have found a home where I can teach people, teach myself as well, to prevent situations. And we all know that diabetes has reached epidemic proportions. And we need to start looking at it from the point of view of prevention. And so today's presentation hopefully will emphasize a few things. And as always, I like to approach topics from an angle that is not commonly thought of. I hope this is what I have succeeded in doing today. Right, diabetes mellitus is, as I said, epidemic proportions right now. And I want to discuss specifically type 2 diabetes. And that's because in November, we call it Men's Health Awareness Month. Many men and women are affected by diabetes. And also we have on the 9th of November, National Diabetes Heart Connection Day. Isn't that profound? That they should actually have a day where they have connected the effects of diabetes on cardiovascular situations. They're huge, huge. And then of course on yesterday, which was the 14th of November, was the World Diabetes Day. Now, there are many, many health awareness days, but we in this family should be aware of them and use them correctly, not to promote diseases, but to promote our message of prevention of those conditions. And I hope you agree with me on that one. So I want to start by putting diabetes into perspective. Millions of people have diabetes. Half of the people that have diabetes don't even know that they have it. And greater than diabetes itself are the complications and the side effects, perhaps of the disease or the methods of treating that disease. Then a third of cases of end-stage kidney disease or failure are as a result of diabetes. So many people's kidneys have failed, and we can attribute that failure to diabetes. And then a huge proportion of deaths as a result of diabetes are due to cardiovascular disease. Hence, I suppose that day when they make that connection and commemorate the fact that it is indeed a fact. And then diabetes is the leading cause of amputations, and it is also the leading cause of blindness. So what we are dealing with is a major challenge. And I think in our family, the Neolife family, we are always up to a challenge. We like to tackle challenges. And so let's go for it. I first want to describe type 1, but we are focusing on type 2. But just to say that type 1, which used to be called juvenile diabetes, is an autoimmune disorder whereby the beta cells in the pancreas are disabled by an autoimmune condition, the immune system turning on itself. Okay, so let's just carry on and talk about type 2, the one that has caused the modern epidemic. My question is this: are we approaching the whole challenge of type 2 diabetes from the wrong end? And so I'm about to justify why I've asked that question with the presentation. But before I do, did you know that high sugar diets are correlated to increased risk of Alzheimer's? I thought I should stick this in at the beginning so that you do not forget as we go ahead, that yes, indeed, the points that I'm going to make should be remembered, okay? Now, let us discuss the root cause of insulin resistance. And just so that you know, the reason that people are developing massive cases of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, is as a result of insulin resistance. Now, just to describe it, insulin is that very, very important hormone that helps our bodies to use nutrients. The sugars, the fats, and the proteins, they can only be used when there's enough insulin working properly, and the nutrients are the right nutrients, obviously. So what has happened lately, since food processing began, was that we have too much dietary sugar and the wrong types of fat. And those lead to a reduction in sensitivity to insulin, among other things, but that is what we are describing as insulin resistance, reduced sensitivity to insulin. And that is largely because of the perhaps deficiencies in that diet and too much of the inflammatory sugars and fats. And so the result of that is that the body tries hard to secrete more insulin because there is this reduced sensitivity and therefore resistance. It tries very hard to secrete more and more, and the cells of the pancreas are really working overtime because this food keeps coming at them, the food that we are putting in our mouths. And so as more and more insulin is required, that phenomenon that we are discussing now, that I have described as the root cause, perhaps, the phenomenon of insulin resistance is established. So what happens next is that because there is so much inflammation, there are harmful effects. Too much insulin causes inflammation. So what happens, because insulin is traveling in the blood vessels, they become inflamed, okay? Inflammation of the arteries, and that can lead to all sorts of challenges: heart attacks, strokes, hypertension. Then, of course, because of the nature of the processed foods, there's been a total imbalance of our cholesterols and triglycerides, so that there is a very high amount of triglyceride levels. That's a kind of fat that can be measured when one goes to check their cholesterol levels. I've called it fatty blood. And you know, it's not a joke, because I have seen when there is a very high level of triglycerides, that the blood is actually very oily, very, very fatty. And I've seen a few situations, and it can be quite frightening. And then there is this imbalance in that there is low HDL cholesterol lower than it should be. That is the high density lipoprotein, high density lipid cholesterol is low. And then the low density one is high, and most of it is the very low density lipid cholesterol. Now, please excuse me, I'm going to have to stop sharing so that I clear my screen, and kindly, if you can't, wait until you get home to draw. I'd appreciate it if you please try and wait. Okay. And then another thing that happens, the harmful effect of too much insulin, is weight gain, especially around the middle of the body. That's what I meant by central weight gain. Then there's also increased tendency to form blood clots. Now, this can happen over several years. It isn't something that happens in 2 weeks or 3 months. No, it's something that happens over several years. And then, as we carry on with our story, after years of working hard to maintain blood sugar at a stable level, because remember, there's that roller coaster that is set up as blood sugar goes up and down, up and down. After years of working very hard, eventually the pancreas quits. It just says, I give up. I can't carry on like this. And guess what happens after years? We then generally grow older, right? So yes, the pancreas will quit, and then symptoms begin to alert the person or the person so affected to seek a diagnosis. And these are the symptoms: excessive thirst. The person might be always hungry. They might start passing large volumes of urine frequently. Then at last, if they were previously quite overweight, they might lose weight. And I've just tongue-in-cheek, I've cheekily said, please do not congratulate yet, because it might be a sign of things not being well. And then they might develop frequent infections, you know, symptoms like that, that will prompt them to go and seek attention. And I like to focus on men's health for the reason that men seem to wait until the last minute. And I hope this will galvanize all of us, men and women, into action. So then our story continues. The diagnosis of diabetes is made. Yes, indeed, the diagnosis can be made by a few simple tests. And we all know that once a diagnosis is made, there are medications to treat this condition. And so before we default to medication, I want us to discuss fully what else there is, because have we asked the right questions? And I believe, quite honestly, the key question is, what causes insulin resistance? Okay, so let's take a few steps back. Let us get to know, as I've often said, the person before we become super fascinated by the disease. Okay, diabetes, yes, it is a condition, it is something to be feared, but let us focus on the individual in front of us. That's what I like to do in my capacity as a medical doctor. And I do appreciate that not all of you are medically trained. I appreciate that. But I'm just saying that because we are interacting with people and we like to recommend what we've got, I thought this was a good talking point, that we need to get to know what we are up against. So we should indeed be concerned. At the time of the actual diagnosis of diabetes, most people already have major cardiovascular disease, because as I pointed out, too much insulin in the preceding several years causes damage to the blood vessels, okay? And then this is actually a huge disadvantage even before they start medication. So you can imagine when they start medications, what will happen? Then it is critical to recognize insulin resistance as soon as possible. It is absolutely important, okay? And I just want to start bringing out what our solutions should be focused on, and that is lifestyle change. This picture is to describe a condition called the metabolic syndrome, or it used at some point to be called syndrome X. When it was first diagnosed or described, they named it syndrome X because associated with diabetes and blood pressure was an abnormal cholesterol profile, lipid profile, and there was this central obesity, a lot of collection of fat, and that causes a lot of inflammation. So the question is, what is the diet? And is the diet that we're eating causing insulin resistance? Now here I've put the food triangle or the food pyramid as we know it. We might, after we've stopped the slideshow, have a lively discussion, because I want to propose to everybody that maybe the base of it being largely lots of carbohydrate and some of it being processed carbohydrate, all these breads and things. We may have to rethink that. We really seriously might have to consider what we are doing when we have that food triangle. And I just want to put it out there that actually it's becoming so questioned that it might be very soon outdated, but we'll discuss that. Okay, so diagnosing insulin resistance. You know, not many doctors send people off to have a fasting insulin level. Not many. It's becoming more and more recognized as an important test. And yeah, it's something that we need to consider. But the other way of diagnosing insulin resistance, many of you might find interesting, is an indirect method where the ratio of the triglycerides, those blood fats or the fatty portion of the blood, to the high density lipid, which you will get always when a lipid profile is done. When people go and check their cholesterol levels, that is what we call a lipid profile, they'll get that. It is possible then to do that ratio, and there's an indication that insulin resistance is developing if the ratio is greater than 2, okay? And it is, especially if you put it into context. Remember, we need to know the patient as well, know the client. Let me call them a client. So if you know that it is associated with a rising blood pressure and an increasing waistline, then maybe you pause and cleverly tell them that maybe you're developing insulin resistance, and I think I have solutions for you, which we are going to discuss as we go on. So I thought I would give you a case study. I've never done this before, but today I have a case study. This is somebody who actually sent me results to look at. And this is what it looked like. Total cholesterol was there. You can see it at leisure, but the triglycerides were super high. Previously, that was a year ago, and then most recently this year. They had dropped because I think somebody had advised him, or maybe started him on medication, I don't know. But he did say to me that, yes, he had decided to cut back on the carbohydrates and to start, the processed carbohydrates, and to eat more vegetables and fruits. So over the year, that is what his results look like. VLDL, that is very low dense lipid cholesterol. That is the type that indicates inflammation, a lot of inflammation. So previously, he was over the reference range, and then it was coming down. Then HbA1c, that is a measure of the glycosylation, the sugar coating of our red blood cells. It gives a more accurate estimate and picture over, let's say, about 3 months, rather than taking a random blood sugar, which will be for that moment, as it were. So that is another measure that we use. And previously, it was lower than it was currently, which I found interesting. But be that as it may, I thought I would project these just out of interest and to make a point that I'm going to make now. So the question was, is there insulin resistance? And remember that formula that I gave, the ratio of triglycerides to the HDL cholesterol. Previously, it was 255 over 36, that ratio, and it was over 7, just over 7, which is way over 2, right? And then currently, there was improvement, but it wasn't yet under 2. So he was on the right track, okay? So that is just a tip for those of you who are interested. And in a nutshell, I just want to say, we have to pay attention to insulin resistance. In other words, insulin is no longer able to work because of overwhelming amounts of processed sugars and fats. And the result is that the pancreas is pumping out until it gives up, okay? That is the underlying problem in most cases of type 2 diabetes. So focusing on treating blood sugar levels is actually not getting us to be, to find a solution to the problem. It is not, okay? So let us aggressively encourage lifestyle changes that improve insulin sensitivity. So one might ask, what are those? One lifestyle change that encourages and improves insulin sensitivity is that lifestyle habit of fasting. Yes, I can hear a few people complaining, but seriously, that improves insulin sensitivity. Type 2 diabetes treatment should rely on medications as a last resort, because the traditional teaching is that you start with tablets, and if they don't work, then you graduate that client onto injectables. I would like to say that in the modern way of approaching type 2 diabetes, it is very, very important to emphasize lifestyle change in order to improve insulin sensitivity, because the underlying problem is insulin resistance. So you must limit foods like that, please. They cause too much inflammation and oxidative stress. The fats in there are not healthy. And just as a news flash, the secret to good health is learning how to choose correctly. And when you take out all the bad stuff and put in the good stuff, you will create balance. And your body is intelligent enough to know how to create health from those right habits and ingredients. So here they are as examples. We recommend and support lifestyle changes. Here they are. Exercise, very important. Rehydrating, resting, healthy food, sunshine so that vitamin D is made, as long as all the right nutrients are available. And a big one for those who are guests to this call, you'll be surprised by this. But yes, we also recommend changing your cleaning products because of the inflammation that ordinary ones that are store-bought can cause. So, in short, lifestyle changes will prevent deterioration to frank diabetes from insulin resistance. And that is our goal, so that we don't get to frank diabetes. Because by the time somebody arrives at frank diabetes, it might be rather late and the damage to the cardiovascular system is advanced. So yes, breathe and eat more of the right things. So just a few points to ponder. A lot of free radicals that are produced in the blood by high blood sugar, when one is diabetic, cause a lot of damage. And one of them is that there is a huge deficiency of vitamin E. Diabetics, for some reason, don't use the fat-soluble vitamins very well. So they're usually deficient in vitamins A, D, E, and because of the microbiome in the gut, the gut bacteria not functioning very well, even vitamin K. So just remember that. And then also, the role of excess blood sugar causes inflammation. I just want to emphasize that point. So that is why we are emphasizing that. Remember to hydrate. Yeah. Look at what people reach out for when they are thirsty. A lot of people reach out for cool, carbonated, sweetened drinks, which is not a good idea at all. And then other points to ponder. Diets of processed foods are very zinc deficient. Also, diabetics cannot convert carotenoids to vitamin A. So you might have to consider supplementing vitamin A until insulin sensitivity improves. Then you should advise that people who might be insulin resistant heading towards diabetes to control intake of carbohydrates. That's what we are talking about here, because some foods have a very high glycemic index, which means you eat them and very quickly blood sugar shoots up. Then we have to advise generally not to overeat and to supplement, because those are important. And talking about the high glycemic index, you know, it's always heartbreaking to see somebody who has been diagnosed with diabetes eating food that has a high glycemic index because they have been put on medication. So in their mind, they say, it is okay, I can do whatever I want as far as my diet goes. I've got the medication. That is so, so sad. And I'll reiterate it, that our role as a family is to help people to actually become healthier. And with that kind of mentality, we need to really do a lot of educating. Yes, so medications, I've pointed out, should be the last resort. And then why vitamin C is very, very important. Vitamin C is important to build collagen, and it also helps to prevent build-up of a certain alcohol in the red blood cells that is formed from too much sugar, okay? It's called sorbitol. So we need to encourage them in order not to go blind and develop cataracts and other eye problems, retinopathies as we call them. We need to encourage them to have plenty of these nutrients. So those were just a few points. And of course, the carbohydrates. These are all carbohydrates, leafy vegetables and certain fruits and sweet potatoes, yams, and pumpkins are all complex carbohydrates, not the processed ones that cause the blood sugar to shoot up. So yes, now introducing our supplements. I'll start with the core nutrition, which we all know, Pro Vitality and Neolife Shake. That is a breakdown of Pro Vitality. We've gone through it a few times when we're doing core nutrition. It's very important, but among them, we have omega-3 fatty acids, which are very, very important for correcting the balance between the HDL and the LDL, the high density lipid cholesterol and the low density. The challenge is when there is an imbalance. So rather than being fixated by too high a cholesterol level, because maybe they measure it and they tell you your total is way high, be more concerned about the balance between high density and low density, and the ratio should be 1 to 2. And then remember the triglycerides as well, as I've mentioned. So quickly, vitamin C, we need to remember to detox regularly. Garlic is amazing for keeping the blood nice and flowing. We need to also think about the protein, which helps with weight loss, and it is cardioprotective, and it will effect a reduction of the low density cholesterol and improve the high density cholesterol, as does the omega-3, all in the core nutrition. Then vitamin E, I mentioned, because of the deficiency, it's good to supplement it, as with zinc, as with botanical balance. Botanical balance has chromium, which helps with insulin sensitivity. And the other one that is so important is magnesium. Okay, these are our antioxidants, but there is magnesium. Sorry about the order. I just want to go back to the previous one. The phyto defense, for those who really need a power-packed antioxidant combination, this is important. Otherwise, you can get each item as a standalone. So yes, we are a family that is proud to have these products accessible to us. I thought we should approach diabetes, yesterday being World Diabetes Day, from a different point of view. So now you are welcome to unmute and to engage in a discussion.
Hi, Dr. Cesar.
Hi.
Yes, Clement here.